unmuted now.
Oh, cool. Sorry if I accidentally muted you.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Hi, everybody. Just want to welcome you again. We've been diligently working on this project. It is for basically to get SROs out of public schools, just to be frank. We rather prefer alternatives, and tonight's just to discuss basically what's going on, how we can come together, and how we can start to make change in our community. I want to start by giving my own introduction. My name is Clark Denman. I am a doula supervisor. I am also a childbirth educator, a lactation counselor at the Young Women's Resource Center. I work on the Young Powerful Mothers team. I see a couple of our other coworkers here. Hello, Young Women's Resource Center. And now I'm going to go ahead and give it to Frida to talk about what she does at the center.
Well, thanks, Clark. I am also an employee of the Young Women's Resource Center. I work with Clark on the doula stuff, the doula program, and I also supervise our empowerment programming. So both Clark and Chelsea and I, we all work pretty closely with DMPS. We do a lot of programming like within the schools during the school day, and then we also do after school programming. So we have a lot of interaction with like DMPS staff, DMPS students. You know, we love DMPS. They're like the majority of the folks that we serve. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we were, felt sort of moved to like put this event on. And yeah, it's just sort of an event to like bring some folks together who maybe want to like learn more about the SRO program, kind of like share maybe their thoughts, experiences, ideas. And yeah, so we've also just seen a lot of working in the schools, you know, we see the need for more student support services. We've also like witnessed SRO behaviors within the schools while we were there as employees of the Women's Center that, you know, we found inappropriate. And then also the violence that we witnessed like firsthand and on social media against like children and youth this summer on the streets while they were, you know, peacefully protesting at the hands of the Des Moines Police Department. So those were kind of some of the events that like inspired this meeting. I think I just saw Chelsea join, so I'm gonna go ahead and try and find her to unmute her so she can do a little introduction. Chelsea, would you like raise your hand? Sorry, our participant list is just so long. If your computer's working.
Oh, there we go.
Wait, do you see her? I don't see her. Sorry, y'all. Chelsea, where are you? Pronouns, please. Thank you, Linda. I use they, them, or she, her pronouns.
And I use she, her pronouns as well. While Chelsea is, while Frida is looking for Chelsea also, I just wanted to add that she brought up a very good point about how SROs treat the students in schools and the kind of the behavior that goes on and how it affects each student individually. So that's why this meeting is very important, just not so that we can tell you guys about what's going on in the schools, but also so that you can kind of tell us like your thoughts and what you think goes on in the community, so that we, like I said before, can just come together and really figure out the best solution possible, because it is about our students and the young women that we serve and the demographic that we serve. That makes this a highly important topic to us. It's very something we have a lot of passion behind, for sure. Oh, I see we found Chelsea. Here we go.
Okay, hello.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That was a whole thing. Sorry, everyone. My name is Chelsea. I work as an empowerment program specialist at the Young Women's Resource Center. So I'm on the same team as Frida. Did y'all already do your introductions, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do a lot of the same work as Frida, like in school and after school programming for 5th through 8th grade. I do our 6th grade after school group and our Black Girl Magic group this year. And yeah, I'm on the advocacy committee with Clark and Frida. I think that's all. I use she, her pronouns. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm just gonna go ahead and start our little PowerPoint we have going, and then Chelsea's gonna kick it off for us with some community agreements, I believe.
Yes. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to pull up had to restart my computer, so I'm trying to pull everything back up.
You're good. While Chelsea does that, this is just like a little agenda for the meeting today.
Sorry, y'all. Okay. So for those who aren't familiar, community agreements are essentially just kind of like a set of, we use them a lot, well, actually in all of our groups at the Young Men's Resource Center, but they're kind of like a set of more like informal rules that we generally have the whole group to put in place just to make it a very kind of like safe, inclusive environment for everyone. So we thought it would be a good idea to just have a few of those for this meeting tonight. We kind of came up with some of our own that we thought would be most helpful for this town hall. So we listed a few here. Our first one is one voice, one mic. So we probably won't have a problem with this just because everyone is muted outside of whoever will be talking. But if you do have a question or a comment at any time throughout the evening, feel free to put that in the chat, and we will do our best to address that or answer your question. Our next one is respectful language. So we use this a lot in our groups too, but we just kind of self-explanatory. We just ask everyone to be as like courteous and kind as possible. If there happens to be any use of like profanity or inappropriate language, we will probably just ask you to leave. Being mindful of time. So we have an hour and a half tonight. So we're just asking everyone to like respect their speaking time and kind of like respect the agenda. And then our next one is no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. So this community agreement kind of just asks us all to be open-minded, to recognize that everyone comes to a conversation in a space with different viewpoints, different backgrounds, and we all have something to learn from each other. So we just ask you to listen as best you can, ask your questions, speak your truth. We're all here to learn. And our last one is to just acknowledge the difference between intent and impact. So a lot of times the way we intend a statement or an action might not match the impact that's felt afterwards. So I don't know if that'll be an issue tonight, but just being mindful of if something does come out harmful. Sometimes it can just be apologizing, but yeah. So we're gonna kick it off with just a little like educational piece. Frida and Clark and I spent a little bit of time doing some research on school resource officer programs, both here in Des Moines and nationally. And so the U.S. Department of Justice defines the SRO program as sworn law enforcement officers responsible for safety and crime prevention in schools. So they are typically employed by a local police or sheriff's agency. They essentially are police officers just in a school, and their responsibilities are very similar to police officers. So they have the ability to make arrests, they can respond to calls for service, and then they can document incidents. And then, so nationally, the 1994 Gun-Free Schools Act was right around the time when SRO programs started. So this was a federal grant that provided $750 million in funding for 6,500 new police officers in schools across the country. And that funding was from 1999 to 2005. And from our research, we just found that the arrest rates of students increased substantially after this funding was granted. specifically around the year 1999. And we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but the school to prison pipeline is something that's obviously very much related to this, and these grants just kind of started a lot of that. So here we have some information on the Des Moines Public Schools SRO program specifically. So here in Des Moines, the program started in 1999, so that was just a few years after that federal funding was granted. Currently, there are 11 officers working in DMPS schools. There's one at each high school, and then the rest are split between 9 middle schools. So not all schools have them, but a fair amount do. And again, they're employed by DMPD, and then they're funded halfway between DMPD and DMPS. And then we included a little bit of information on the training that they receive. So it's a 5-day, 40-hour training, and there isn't a whole lot of information on what all that includes, but it's supposed to qualify them to work in a school environment with youth. And then they do a 3-day, 24-hour training after a year serving as a school resource officer. From what we know, there isn't a whole lot of information or like things covered in those trainings around like restorative or transformative justice, around like anti-racism or implicit bias, de-escalation techniques. A lot of it is kind of just like that standard, from what we've seen, or from what we researched, a lot of it seems to be that standard like police officer training. So. Is this also my part? Oh, sorry. Yeah. I did not realize this was also part of my my section. Sorry, y'all. So the budget for the SRO program is pretty substantial. It is about $1.25 million per year. And again, it's split 50-50 between, so the school district funds 50% of it, and then DMPD funds another 50%. The rough estimate, like the majority of the SRO budget is spent on personnel. So that's like salary, the SRO officers, salary and benefits. The SRO budget has pretty much just increased or remained the same over the last 5 years. So again, that's kind of why we're coming together and wanted to put this on, because we very much think there should just be a decrease and a removal altogether. And then, yeah, the slide kind of runs through some extra portions of the Des Moines budget, but you can see that the police budget is pretty hefty. And there's not a lot for community mental health resources. The Civil and Human Rights Department is pretty small. So again, we just kind of wanted to shine a light on how much money is going to police, and specifically to police in schools here in Des Moines.
Cool, thank you so much, Chelsea. Next, we're just gonna touch real quick on some of like the impact that we know police have in schools through the SRO programs, because we know that like the intention of these programs and, you know, people's intentions don't always line up with the impact or the results that they have. So police presence in schools, pretty problematic. Like Chelsea said, nationally, since 1999, since the expansion of SRO programs, we've seen like a huge increase in arrest rates of children and youth. We've seen just like reports of incidences of violence all across the country, in schools and out of schools, police like enacting violence on children and youth in our communities. Research has also found that like higher security measures in schools really disrupts the learning environment for students, because it creates some like mistrust between the student and the school, and it also just stresses students out to have all these increased security measures. And then also, Chelsea kind of touched on this, but the school to prison pipeline, essentially it's a way in which students are pushed out of schools and into the juvenile justice system, typically through some harsh disciplinary policies. So students of color, low-income students, students with disabilities, and LGBTQ students really like bear the brunt of this pipeline, and they're far more likely to be arrested or referred to law enforcement within schools, which then just funnels them into the criminal justice system. So we have some like facts here nationally about students with disabilities, Black students, Latinx students, how much more likely they're to be arrested or referred to law enforcement within schools. We know like from studies and everything that these higher rates of discipline for students of color compared to like their white peers, that can't be explained by differences in like their rates of misbehavior or even differences in like income levels between students. The disparities that we see here are due to implicit bias, they're due to institutional racism and institutional ableism within schools and within SRO programs. So a little bit about the impact of SROs in Iowa. Over the past like 5 to 7 years, schools across the state have reported like a huge increase in arrest rates of students and referrals to law enforcement. Iowa as a state has the second highest student arrest risk in the country. So students are very high risk in the state of Iowa for being arrested while they're at school. In Iowa, Black girls are 9 times more likely to be arrested than white girls. And I'm just gonna say that again. In Iowa, Black girls are 9 times more likely to be arrested at school than white girls. Looking at the Des Moines Police Department, there's been a lot of kind of attention on them, especially this summer, but they're looking at their use of force. It's increased a lot over the past 5 years, and it's been disproportionately like violence that they've enacted against Black people in our city. And this is the agency that staffs our SRO program, right? Like these are the police officers, these are the people that have power over our students in the school system. So we don't have a ton of data specific to our district, to DMPS, and a couple of reasons. So Roa and Kai, some really amazing people, are going to be presenting after us about some information that they've found about the SRO program within schools. But also there's just not a lot of data out there about DMPS's SRO program. Like Chelsea Clark and I, we've been like having meetings with the city budget department. We've been, emailing cops. We've been talking to school board members, just like really trying to gather this data. And as far as we can tell, there's no data available about recidivism rates, about arrest rates, formal charges, transformation or transformative justice responses within schools, or like how much the police department is involved in student referrals. Like that just doesn't exist. They're just not even tracking that. DMPS did release some SRO referral rates last month. And the reason we didn't include those in this PowerPoint is because it's like looking at the numbers, the reporting seems very inconsistent year to year. So it doesn't really like tell a clear story about what's happening in the schools, but we'll make sure to like email that data out to everyone so y'all have a chance to look at it afterwards. Okay, and then finally, this kind of big question, right? Because we're, we all have an invested interest in our schools and in keeping students safe and supported. Do SROs keep schools safe? Generally, it seems like they don't. So there are very few studies available that actually have like reliably evaluated the effectiveness of SRO programs. Like there's just not that much data out there. The school survey on crime and student safety did find that increasing police presence in schools does not relate to decreased crime rates in schools for any type of crime. So we know that police aren't preventing like crime from happening in schools. And then there's also the question of like school shooters, right? Because I feel like that's the first thing that comes up a lot of the time when we talk about SROs, when we talk about taking, money away, SROs away from schools. It's a very valid question. I think that that's like a real visceral fear that we all have. And when talking about this in relation to the SRO programs, I think it's important to know that it's very unlikely for a school shooting to happen. Far more likely for a school to like burn down, but we don't spend over $1 million a year putting firefighters in our schools. The American Journal of Medicine also found that like having police in the school is not a guarantee that a active shooter will be stopped, right? Because like 40% of schools affected by gun violence since 1999. They've had they've employed an officer on school grounds during it. And this is not to say that like active shooters, school shootings should not be like taken seriously and prevented. But, you know, we have found through our research, through a lot of other people's research, that like gun violence prevention programs and efforts, mental health accessibility and intervention, those are far more effective at reducing the rate of school violence and school shootings than just increasing security measures within schools. All right, Clark, it's all you. Are you unmuted? Yes.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you so much, Frida, for that. Next, we're going to talk about the alternatives to SROs, because there's other ways to protect our schools, quote unquote, and also to protect our students and have everybody feel more comfortable and safe. As pointed out in the ACLU report that is titled Cops, Not Counselors, today's students experience high levels of anxiety and trauma and depression, as we all know, especially in a time like this. And I want to read this direct quote to you all. School counselors, nurses, social workers, and psychologists are frequently the first to see children who are sick, stressed, or traumatized, especially in low-income districts. So with that being said, if we invest more in mental health rather than investing in making sure that we have SROs on our grounds, many of the students will feel much safer. Their mental health will improve. Their attendance will improve. The peer-to-peer communication will improve. All of that will improve greatly. It also shows that relationships between students and parents and staff are more important in making the school safe than increased security measures. So basically, if we get alternatives for our students, everybody can live a happier life. If we hire staff that respond to the root of the cause of conflict, more like a counselor or somebody trained to basically break down the core of the problem rather than just attack what's going on or act on emotions or what they feel like is in their job description. So community intervention workers, behavior interventionists, transformative justice coordinators, school aides, community school resource coordinators, and peer mediators. All of those basically are peer-to-peer, I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying that, solutions basically to help people out, and also having people that they know within their community and their environment that they can trust and go to. Guidance counselors, therapeutic counselors, social workers, therapists, psychologists, and substance abuse counselors, as we know, are also very, very handy, especially for students that are going through things maybe at home or they don't know how to handle a problem that they're having within themselves. They just need somebody to talk to. Mental health is so important and needs to be highlighted at all times. I don't think it ever needs to be overlooked. That's why I feel like, or we all actually feel like, that is more important than having an SRO. I'm ready for the next slide. A little definition here of transformative justice is just a liberatory approach to violence, which seeks safety and accountability. So basically, it doesn't rely on alienation, punishment, incarceration, or policing. Going back to what Frida and Chelsea both mentioned, the school to prison pipeline is not a good one, and it's becoming more and more of a problem. It's increasing. So if we alienate students or punish them or try to put them in jail for simply having a school fight or doing something that they acted out because they're having a problem at home or they're going on their defense, that's not fair and that's not right, and that's just increasing our problem. So if we create opportunities to build community and transform interpersonal relationships and decrease harm, that's taking into account the needs of people who are harmed and people who have been harmed that are in the surrounding community. So we just need to consider everybody, consider what they're going through, consider their situation, and like I said, get to the root of the problem rather than just attacking it. So the outcomes in school districts basically, once again, are strengthening our communities, preventing bullying, reducing student conflicts, and there's also drastic reductions in suspension and expulsion rates by students who say that they're happier and feel safer. So that's basically in schools that already have taken these measures to take SROs out of their schools or decrease them drastically. So next is a slide basically about what schools are doing what. And I do want to give you guys some specific examples because as you can see here, they've taken them out in Minneapolis, Toronto, Phoenix, Seattle, Oakland. So it's working in major cities all around us. So basically I feel like that proves that it can work as well in Des Moines, which is a little bit of a smaller city, but still a major city. So just some specifics, in Minneapolis, they ended contracts with police departments, opted instead of having SROs, they now have safety coaches. And in 2017, they addressed mental health and de-escalated conflict. So that already shows you that this is definitely possible. Also in Toronto, nearly 250,000 students ended their SRO program 3 years ago after anti-Black racism concerns. As we know, especially in a time right now with Black Lives Matter, not everybody feels safe having police officers around. Not everybody feels safe seeing a police officer in their environment every single time that they come to school, somewhere that they're supposed to learn and grow and thrive within their peers and within themselves so that they can get a better education. Lastly, let's talk about, not Chicago, let's talk about California. Free LA High School in Los Angeles, which was founded in 2007. The school practices transformative justice to heal from violence and prevent future violence. The school has peacekeepers on staff to help maintain a positive school climate and address any issues that come up among students. So they built their school off of this, the word I'm looking for is basically this ideology to have an ideal environment for their students. So like I said before, it's very possible, and it can make everybody happier. It can make everybody thrive in the environment where they're meant to thrive. And this can be great for everybody around, not just in Des Moines, but maybe in our surrounding schools as well, and hopefully eventually all of America and North America. So next, I want to introduce Roa and Kai, excuse me. They're gonna give us a wonderful PowerPoint on the data that they found within their school in the Des Moines Public School System.
Roa and Kai, would y'all mind raising your hands real quick just so I can find you a little faster in our participant list? Okay, Roa, you should be unmuted. Hi, you should be as well. Thanks, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and share your PowerPoint and then you can take it away.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce myself. Can you guys hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay.
Sound great.
So my name is Kai. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior at Roosevelt, and I'm a Scorpio sun.
Hello, my name is Roa Kadera. I use she, her pronouns as well, and I'm also a junior at Roosevelt High School. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'm just gonna go in and talk about the survey details. And so we conducted this survey just to see the viewpoint of how our community felt about SROs, and just to read the room. And so survey details, we had 202 anonymous participants, and we distributed from online, so my Twitter followers and even Movement 515's Twitter followers, and it was just went around virtually. Yeah.
And for the people who participated in the survey, about 14.4% were staff, 54% was students, 28% was alumni or former students, and the others were parents.
And then the racial demographics, about 56.7% of the survey takers were white. Our next two biggest percentages, we have Black, which is 10.9%, and then we have bi/multiracial, which is also 10.9%.
So we'd like to give a trigger warning because we do have responses to questions from community members that do depict brutality against students, sexual violence, as well as mentions of rape. So do what you can to be able to protect yourself, as you know your well-being is above everything else. So the big question that we asked is, do you feel comfortable with SROs in DMPS? And 22% said no, and overwhelmingly 78% said yes.
Here are some responses. The first is from staff. And so this first one says that police officers escalate violence and they don't have the proper training to build healthy relationships with students or staff, and are instigative and create toxic distrust between students and like staff in the building. And then our second response is from an alumni, and they talk about working at the Young Women's Resource Center and how they do a lot of work with DMPS, and they just believe that like SROs do not have the proper training to like deal with students in an effective way.
And I also collected data represented how staff members specifically responded to this question. And most of them said that, yes, they do feel uncomfortable with SROs in our school system because they're able to recognize that it does lead to the prison pipeline. It does harm students in the education field. And for those who said yes, most of them said yes, pertaining to their own selves, as they are white and so they do not feel specifically targeted. However, they were able to realize how their students felt in their responses. And then there were a few, about 1 or 2 people who still believed that there is a need to be able to connect a relationship with the SROs because it's helpful for the community. However, later when we share student responses, that is kind of contradicted. And our second question is, have you ever witnessed SROs being inappropriate in the school setting? And overall, about 38% said no, and 62% said yes.
Sorry, y'all. I just want to offer like a brief, I think these are backwards. I think that looking at the data, I saw that 77.7% said no and 22% said yes for do you feel comfortable with SROs and DMPS?
Oh yeah, it is backwards.
No, you're good. You're good. I just wanted to make that clear before we moved on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I'm going to go over some of the responses. Let me get back to the slide. Okay. So this first response is from a staff member, and it says, at Central Campus, I have seen officers berate and harass students, use unnecessary harshness of tone, and be aggressive and demeaning with students. And then our first student response is, says, our SRO showed us a video freshman year of 2 Black men who were racially profiled and pulled over by 2 cops, and the SRO stood there in front of the class trying to convince us that the police were right and how it wasn't racial profiling, and shot down like all the other students who tried to like hold him accountable for what he was saying. And this was Officer Moody at Roosevelt High School in 2018. And then this second student response, trigger warning for rape, but it just talks about this student coming to Officer Underwood at Roosevelt and trying to talk about another student who had assaulted her and not being taken seriously, an officer just dismissing like what she was feeling and being very cold. So, yeah. And then this student response talks about there being like a group of students hanging around in the hallway and being told to go back to class or to either leave the building, which also like is not very good for just students in general, but being told to leave the building instead of like addressing the problem. And how an officer like came up to a student and grabbed his arm and like pushed them around and radioed for like more students and just like really instigated what was already happening and turning this like simple interaction of being told to go to class to like these students being like hauled off and arrested.
And our third, I believe it was our third question with responses, asked, do you have any firsthand accounts with SROs being inappropriate? And for the pie graph, it is opposite as well. So 70% said no, they do not have any firsthand responses. However, 30% did. And within those who did have firsthand experiences, one student replies, in second semester of 2018 school year, my friend and I were having a fight. And then one of the girls who was involved told the SRO that one of my close friends tried to rape her. And then I stood by and let it happen. This never happened, but my friend and I were taken in and questioned. My friend, who was black, was questioned alone after he told me that the officer was trying to forcibly admit that something he never did. When the officer questioned me, he kept trying to say that I was a bright student and I shouldn't hang out with kids like him, referring to my friend. He kept trying to pressure me into telling all my friends the faults of theirs and everything bad that he ever did in life. I didn't say anything and just denied anything he tried to make up. The officer then dismissed me and told me to never tell anyone of his questioning and not mention anything that happened. Listening to him for the fear of life detaining me for something minor, and that I never did. The girl that told the officer, my friend that tried to rape her, was told that the friend never admitted, but that I never admitted it, but I was asked if she wanted to press charges. My friends that were friends with her told to just back off the whole ordeal and admit to exaggerating about the things and not press charges. The officer told her that she was fine and never mentioned anything that happened. An alumni former student also said, this SRO constantly distracted me from schoolwork and made the point of my life of school uncomfortable by looping my neighborhood constantly during independent study hour. And then they also commented that the SRO did know the place of location that he did live. And another student also commented, in the spring semester, my freshman, this is Kai's part. Kai, go ahead.
It's fine. So this is actually my response. And so in this, I'm talking about my freshman year at East High School. If you've ever been in East, the gym's kind of disconnected from the main building. And there's like little connector spots. And so I was coming back from gym in this like connector area. And it was like after the second period of lunch, and so there were some kids hanging around, and they were like in a crowd around this girl who was having a panic attack, and she was like, I need you guys to like get away from me, I need space, like I'm on the autism spectrum, and like if I have this many people around me, like it really stresses me out. And so she was explaining to these kids as they crowded her and were like berating her and laughing at her. And like after a while of her like screaming, like the SRO came and he like didn't help her, and he didn't really yell at the kids or like try to de-stress the situation. It was like, hey guys, like class is starting soon, like you should go, but like without like aiding anyone like in distress in the situation. And then later like a staff member came and she was just like, oh, like, and yelled at the girl who was in distress and was like, you should act better, instead of like offering any support.
So overall, that tells us, why do we still have SROs and DMPS? They're obviously unequipped to be able to de-escalate situations within the school environment. They obviously intimidate students through some of the stories that we shared with you. And they're just unequipped to work inside the school environment, which is there to be an environment for students to learn and to excel and create connections with other students as well as staff members. However, that connection is not SORs, and they continue to show that they are unwilling to even put effort in understanding how the school environment works, or understanding students and understanding how to help them.
Also, like when I was administrating this survey and like asking my peers if like they would participate or anything like that, a lot of them didn't even know like what an SRO was or like who that was at their school. And like that's a clear sign of like failure to connect to the community in the first place, of like there's masses of kids who don't know who you are, like what your main function is. And then a couple of people who, like, when you think of SRO, your main function is like, oh, like help with crimes on campus, like help with like school shootings, like with trauma responses. And then with the responses that we shared with you guys today, we can see like how when they were trying to help that girl who like was trying to report like her rapist, like they didn't help her. Or that when that girl was having a panic attack that I witnessed, like this SRO didn't do anything. And that's just like clear, like concrete examples of how they don't help in our district.
Yeah, and it speaks volumes on how DMPS is willing to become a performative activist in a way, saying that they want to be the urban model, they want to be anti-racist. However, they allow the SRO to continue to be in our schools, even though students do not feel comfortable, teachers don't feel comfortable witnessing brutality against their students, because that is traumatic. That is traumatic to the students, and that affects their life forever. So that's everything that we collected for the data. And we will be sharing more of the responses at a later time, so it could be out for the public so everybody could be able to read it and understand the data. So thank you.
Thanks so much, y'all. That was an amazing presentation. Like, oh my goodness. I also just want to uplift Roa and Kai for like stepping up and taking the initiative to create and distribute that survey. Like, y'all are literally doing more than the school district is doing. And it's just like, that's amazing. Thank you both so much. So next, we're gonna ask some of our like community members to speak. So I have a little list. Some folks signed up to speak while they registered for this event, which was awesome. But then we also want to be able to like open up the floor to some other folks if they feel like compelled to share ideas or stories or anything. So Andy and Lyric, do y'all want to go first?
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. My name is Lyric Sellers. I'm a junior at East High School. Andy,
and my name is Andy Montalvo Martinez. I'm a senior at East High School. First, I want to highlight our proposal that we created over the summer and presented to the superintendent. In the proposal, we said that we wanted to prioritize racial and ethnic studies, and so far we've gotten Black history, Chicano studies, Asian American history, and other courses to be added onto a catalog for next year. District-wide changes to curriculum. So far, we're developing US curriculum that centralizes the experiences of marginalized communities. Invest and retain BIPOC educators. This one's really important because representation matters, especially in a district that's 60%, that's student body is 60% of color. Creating equity and racial justice committees at each high school. So far, we created one at our home school at East, and we're in the process of creating one at each DMPS high school and connecting them to their feeder middle school. Also creating racial equity trainings for leadership and educators. We're in the process of creating a student and community-led trainings for leadership and educators. It'll include workshops on bias, de-escalation, things like that. And finally, the removal of SROs. This one's really important because the safest communities have the most resources, not the most cops. And claiming to be anti-racist comes with dismantling a system that's rooted in white supremacy and criminalizes our Black and brown students.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some of the stuff we've done towards SROs and their removal, and then some like action steps to take to support us. So far, we've spoke at the school board meeting, the public forum, and then we have a group developed where anyone's invited, but we're basically getting people on board to join us in fighting for the racial equity proposal in general, but right now we're focusing on the removal of SROs. And so now we have a meeting scheduled with Dr. Ahart and the school board, and we've created an agenda, and basically have found ways to connect with the community and get them educated as well. Part of that is working with people in our group like Roa, like who can create those things that we could post on our social media and things to make sure that students are making educated decisions and thinking about their peers and stuff when making those decisions. We encourage highly to take the survey. The student survey is coming out Monday, and the parent survey is already out. I'm under the impression there will be a staff survey coming out as well. And we, like Andy mentioned, we are developing the equity and racial justice teams at every school. We reached out to every single admin and associate principal at every middle and high school. And our hope is to develop these teams at every school so that this work is being done and sustained and supported by staff, but led by students and their voices. We hope that we can recruit more people so that we can have those things prepared and have people already prepared to lead and recruit more students at their school. And then, yeah, so we meet with the admin. We've met with them already once, and we plan to meet with them 2 other dates that they can attend, one of them being tomorrow. And basically just we'll explain to them the same thing, like what we are doing, what we've done, our plans, and how they can support us. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's incredible. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
And just like amazed by the work that students are doing, and also just like very angry that this work has to fall on the students of like the shoulders of the students, right? That this isn't something that our district is taking more seriously. But thank you both for being here tonight and speaking. We're going to continue to just like support your efforts however we can. Jocelyn, you had signed up to speak. Do you want to go ahead and take the floor for a few minutes?
Hello, I'm Jocelyn Hildebrand, and I'm a senior at East High School. I use she, her pronouns, and I believe some of you may have heard me speak once or twice now before because I just started sharing my experience with SROs. And I'm hoping that by sharing my experience, I can help more people open up about theirs. So I have something written up that I've been reading at a city council meeting and at the school board meeting. 2 years ago, I was physically attacked by another student at school, and I protected myself. After the fight, I was in the office, and the principal and the SRO came in very hostile and yelled at me, saying that I assaulted the hall monitor who split up the fight. I ended up speaking with the hall monitor, who told me he understood the altercation I was in and that he was okay. He understood. Without my mom or any legal counsel present, it was just me in the office with staff. The SRO and the principal told me that I was being charged with assault on a staff member, and I could choose to go to what they said was jail and or go to court or be on probation while participating in a program called the Second Chance Program offered by DMPD and DMPS. As a victim of the assault, I was coerced into this program. My mom still believes it was completely unfair for me to be punished in any kind of way at all. Second Chance was taught by DMPD and their SROs. They took us to Polk County Jail, warning us not to end up there. They told us what incarcerated people wear, how they shower, and what they eat to try to scare us. SROs are not helping students. There are literal statistics from DMPS that prove that they are creating school-to-prison pipelines, literally. I cannot imagine how much worse my experience could have been if I wasn't a white girl. Please do not let SROs into our schools to impact anyone else's life like they did mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jocelyn. I'm really sorry that that happened to you, but I am super proud and inspired by you being here tonight and sharing that story. Okay, next up, Colo, are you with Jalen?
Don't be camera.
Hello.
Hey, we can hear you.
Hey, y'all. So I'm Cole Chanel, she, them pronouns. I am with Black Liberation Movement of Des Moines. Programming department has been doing a lot of research on school to prison pipelines. I've had the opportunity to talk with Jocelyn as well. Kai, thank you for sharing your story, and also the other scholars, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your bravery. That was a lot. And I apologize that you guys have been in these vulnerable positions when it comes to the school to prison pipeline and SROs in the program. I am a Des Moines Public School alumni. I went to Hoover High School. I graduated in 2016. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. When I went to elementary and middle school there, we never had SROs or police officers in the school or in, they were just never involved in the school at all. But then when I moved to Iowa, I'd seen like how involved they were in schools. And I remember Officer Chido, we were walking to class during passing period, and Officer Chido stopped a peer of mine who was a Black male. He had stopped him and was like, hey, like, do you know anyone who killed your friend, your homie? That's what he said. He was like, do you know anyone who killed your homie? Now, I don't know what type of police officer just clocks in at a school just to look for an investigation information, but that is the type of damage that I've seen over the years, over my years at Hoover High School. I remember there being fights at 8 o'clock in the morning, which happens because we're teenagers with hormones. Things like this happen. But I remember there being fights and paddy wagons being in the back of the school. Like, paddy wagons is like something that happens when you're getting sent off to jail. Why are students coming to school seeing paddy wagons and handcuffs? Why are these, why is the school district that caters to Black students, why are they being criminalized? Why are they coming to school being criminalized when school is supposed to be a safe space? I don't understand that. I've been in many situations when SROs have just completely abused their power and made these students vulnerable in these situations, and I do not like it and I do not appreciate it. I do appreciate the work that these students have done to have these conversations like this. I do appreciate the teachers that have been speaking up about this because it isn't okay. Criminalizing youth is not okay. Criminalizing Black students, Black youth is not okay, and we know that happens very often. So yes, yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you all for allowing me to talk.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Colo. Okay. Tanel, am I saying your name correctly? I apologize if I mispronounced it. I thought I saw you join the call tonight, but maybe not. Okay, it looks like we're not able to log in here tonight. Orlando, are you on the call? If you are, either Orlando or Tanel, would y'all raise your hands? Okay, so looks like they were not able to join us tonight, which is fine. Hopefully we can open up more spaces like this in the future to hear their voices and their stories. Would love to open it up now to anyone on this call who would like to share any like thoughts, questions, feedback, ideas? We've heard a lot of stuff tonight and it's been amazing, but I just want to, you know, open up some space and make sure that other folks have some room to chat. So if you want to speak, it's really not as scary as it looks. Go ahead and like raise your hand and I will happily unmute you.
Hey there. First of all, thank you all for, my name's Rachel Gulick. I'm with Girls Rock Des Moines. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's presented this evening. The work that you're doing is crucial for our community and our future. And so thank you so much for putting this all together, and your hard work is being noticed, and just so grateful to you all. I guess I have some questions, and I'm not sure if folks have answers, but I'm really curious about sort of how in Des Moines, at least, we are determining which schools have SROs. I think that would be kind of an interesting data point to look at. And so how is this decided? So I think I saw that we have Josh Mandelbaum in here as well. So thank you for being here tonight as well. But and then also the Second Chance program, how long has that been around, and how much money is going into this program? And I'm also thinking about just, you know, students being put into this position where they are being taken into jail. And it just seems as though that could have quite a lasting negative impact on a student, to say the least, potentially even some PTSD. So I just have a couple questions to maybe get some conversations going, but thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Rachel. Those were great questions. You know, personally, I can't speak to the Second Chance program in Des Moines. I don't know too much about that. But as far as like what schools within DMPS get like SROs posted at them, I mean, Chelsea and Clark like chime in too for sure, but it's my understanding that just all of the high schools and middle schools, all of the high schools have an SRO assigned to them. And then there's like a group of SROs, I think 4 or 5 SROs that kind of like split between the like middle schools, if that makes sense. So there's not an assigned one at each middle school, but they, I guess, just spend their days rotating between the middle schools, or, you know, whatever they do. I don't know how they spend their days. There were some awesome questions in the comments as well, but Matt has his hand up, so I'm gonna go ahead and unmute him.
Hey, how you guys doing? I hope you guys are well. I'm well and in high spirits. I do want to say before I start, peace and power to all the people. I just wanted to share my experience with SROs and how the institution of policing within schools has affected my family. My family is here from Des Moines, Iowa. Well, my mom's family is actually from Fort Madison, Iowa, but she grew up almost her entire life in Des Moines, and I was born and raised here, and raised on the east side of Des Moines. And I went to East High School and graduated from there in 2014. But when I actually was living in Easter Lake, I was living during some district changes that moved all of my family to the south side, right? So my sisters went to Lincoln, and my nephew went to South Union Elementary School. And in the time that they were going to school on the south side, my nephew, who's a young, dark-skinned black boy who does not actually have his father in the home either, was criminalized from the age of about 6 or 7 years old within that school. They would constantly put him in detention in timeouts as a 7-year-old, isolate him from his class, bring his mother in the middle of the day. This was consistent 2, 3, 4, 5 times a month. That his mother's life would be disturbed. She would have to come home from work. My mom would have to come home from work. I would have to take time off of, I would have open schedules as a senior to come in and take care of my nephew because he was being isolated and pushed out of his school. And one day when he was apparently disrupting a hallway and they couldn't find any other means to communicate with him, they called a police officer, their SRO, and had him come and handcuff my nephew and sit him on the curb at the end of the day while the kids are loading the bus. So this event thoroughly humiliated my entire family. It really broke my nephew's relationship and his mother's relationship with all the administration at that school. They left that school. He tried to open and roll around the district. That didn't really work out for him and his mom because she was holding down multiple jobs. And they left the city and they live in Missouri now. And thank God she has, been engaged and he's kind of back on the right track. He loves reading. He's incredibly smart. He's in the equivalent of what gifted and talented is there. He's into engineering and wants to go to college. So he's a brilliant boy, which we all know. He comes from my family. We're all brilliant Black people. But he was thoroughly criminalized and funneled through the prison pipeline, the school to prison pipeline here in Des Moines. So it's very important that we get this issue fixed because it is destroying futures. That is a young Black future that could have came through this city that is now somewhere else. And that's very unfortunate. And it's my family. So thank you guys.
Yeah. Do you mind if I comment really quick, Frida, before we move on? Matt, I just want to comment and say I'm from Arizona, and there's a study in Arizona that was done that shows that what you're saying basically is not just a solitary situation. Like, it is proven that Black children are viewed as more criminal, more threatening, less innocent than any other demographic, and therefore they are punished more harshly. They are handcuffed. There's a story of a child in Houston. She was in kindergarten and she was handcuffed and put into a cop car. So it's like, if this isn't an isolated situation, this is how you know it's a bigger problem than in just Des Moines or just in Iowa. Like, it's really a humongous problem and it's ridiculous. And I just wanted to comment and let you know, like, there's definitely a lot of that going on out here.
Absolutely. It's the whole world.
Yeah, it is. Oh, we can go to the next person, Frida.
No, thank you for that, Clark. Thanks for sharing that. Just want to hold a little more space here. If anyone else wants to speak, please raise your hand. The chat box is open as well.
Frida, I'll go ahead and say something quickly if no one else is raising their hands. I guess I can just speak really only to, I've been at the Young Women's Resource Center for a little over a year now. And of course we went virtually back in March. So I had about 6 months of time where I was doing groups in schools, and it just was pretty, I think of one middle school specifically because I did my group in the counselor's office, but there's 2 counselors for like a whole middle school of students. And you can just, like, I can see, like, when I would go, I would see how just like overworked they were and busy and doing so many things. And that's just like one example, but that I'm sure applies to multiple schools, where it just would be so great to have extra funding for a 3rd, a 4th counselor. I know we've kind of like highlighted it already, but I think that's something that has really stood out to me from my time at the YWRC. And yeah, it's just something I would like to see them not have so many jobs as one person and be able to, I don't know, help more students. So yeah.
Thank you, Chelsea. I absolutely agree. Great stuff going on in the comments as well that I want to uplift. A lot of calls to defund DMPD. Roa just, commented that, like, the just disproportionate demographics of BIPOC students in higher education, like the Gifted and Talented program and in DMPS, like the elitism in the Central Academy is astounding. And there's a lot of anti-Blackness and racism in general to BIPOC students. Thank you for voicing that, Roa. Yes, Beth, yes. Counselors as a resource for support rather than just scheduling for courses, absolutely. We've seen some school districts like bring on more staff that do really amazing work, like actually supporting students and doing kind of more work on that prevention side of things. So I think we can all definitely relate that DMPS schools, they need more support staff, absolutely. And that makes things better for everyone, right? Like teachers and students alike.
I just wanted to share something that I had a conversation with my brother. He is a college student at the moment, and we had this like really good conversation on how there's just a lack of resources to understand the college process, to understand to pay attention in class and stuff like that. And where it's kind of different for me because I am in this specific program, science bound, that caters to BIPOC students, that does help with that. And so he didn't have that opportunity, and like the counselors were not there. Nobody was helping any of the students to be able to go through that process or to become a mentor for students. And that's something that we really need in our schools, because he just like was looking at all the students that he was friends with and looking at the place that they are at now, and like seeing how it was due to the lack of resources in our school. And DMPS really likes to say that, oh, we're urban, blah, 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 all these things. But in reality, that's not what's happening. And they care so much about graduation rates. They care so much about that, but they don't really care about the future of the students, you know? They don't really care about uplifting people and helping them in ways that are impactful for not just their life, but for their kids or their grandkids, you know, generationally. So, yeah.
Thank you, Roa. Lillian, I think you should be unmuted right now.
Okay, so the only reason why I'm really doing this is because I've only really heard one other person talk about an experience that they personally have had as a current student at DMPS. And so sorry about the lighting, and I'm sorry, this is entirely unplanned and I'm a little nervous, but I'm gonna go ahead and share anyways. So around January of last year, I was involved in a student crisis. It was a different student was having some mental health issues, and there was a series of circumstances bringing this on campus, left the campus, and so it was the school's responsibility. And I want to say that I spent probably four hours in the office with the principal, the nurse, the SRO, and a counselor on and off. So the counselor went with a separate part of DMPS, or of the DMPD, to help the student. And the SRO sat with me with the radio to dispatch. That's all he did for 3-4 hours. Just sit there with the radio, asked me the exact same questions the nurse had asked me already, asked me the same questions that the principal had asked me already, taking down the exact same notes that everyone had already taken, and did not talk to the student. I was completely responsible for talking to this other student. I was completely responsible for the de-escalation of this other student. You know, as a 15-year-old watching 3 adults constantly just having their eyes on me, watching me go through this pain, go through this trauma, it was a very disheartening experience for me to actually see the effectiveness of an SRO in a mental health crisis and a student crisis. So I think what I would like to point out is that they're not effective at all. They're not effective in any regard. He had so many opportunities that day to lessen the amount of trauma that I would experience later on. I am now diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from this event, and I heavily blame part of this trauma that I have experienced on that SRO and on the people in that room that day. So I think what I would just like to point out to all of you is that SROs are completely ineffective. He was completely unneeded in that scenario. The counselor went out, not him, to deal with that situation, and he was not needed at all. And there is no reason, there's no reason for him to be in that situation. He freaked this other student out more because I got a cop involved, not my decision. But I think what we really need to do is invest in getting these people out of here, because there's absolutely nothing that was beneficial about that situation that came out of having an SRO there. So yeah.
Lillian, thank you so much for being brave and sharing that story. I really hope that, yeah, we can connect more after this, and yeah, just like love that you're here and that you're involved in this movement, because your story is so important and what you experienced is so important. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Just want to hold space for another minute. If anyone wants to speak, please go ahead and raise your hand, drop things in the chat. Prior, you should be unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Prior. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I just wanted to talk about a minor experience I had with an SRO in a classroom last year. So as part of an assignment, my class was asked to prepare 3 questions for the SRO to come in, and then we had to have a Q&A with our school SRO in the next day in class, which already made me personally uncomfortable because I'm just uncomfortable with the idea of police in our schools already. But someone posed the question to our SRO about relations between the Black community and police, and why the relationship between the police and the Black community is the way that it is. And our SRO responded by saying that the relation between the Black community and the police is there's a lot of conflict because of social media, and that there were videos being especially all over the summer, we've been seeing videos of interactions between police and Black people where power was abused. We've seen people killed on camera by police, and our SRO said that these videos being shared and the police being held accountable is the reason why there is which is the cause of the conflict between the Black community and the police, which I think was extremely inappropriate. I don't think we need police in our schools entirely, and especially not coming into our classrooms and promoting this kind of propaganda. So that was my experience, and that's just my thoughts on the SRO program. Thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing your stories as well.
Thank you so much, Prior. I'm also very sorry that you had to sit through that propaganda and take up your class time and your educational time listening to that man. Okay, well, I don't see any other hands up, and we are at 6:50. Thank you all so much, everybody who shared, and just thank you all so much, everyone, for being here. We're gonna go ahead and wrap up tonight with some action items. So talking a little bit about what is next. This is my portion of the PowerPoint, but Chelsea and Clark, please, please, please jump in if I'm forgetting anything. So through all of our like research, everything here at the Women's Center, we think that like an divest invest model is the way to go. So divesting some or all of the $1.25 million that we're spending right now on this SRO program, investing that into the resources that we actually need, that we actually want to see in our schools. And I'm sure every single person on this call can just like imagine a list of 100 things that they want to see in their school. And so the idea that we get to like build that and make that possible together is just like so meaningful to me. So this means getting involved in the city and school district budget process. Typically, these processes are not that easy or accessible to get involved in. And that's like not an accident, right? That's on purpose. So we're gonna be following up with the 100 people who registered for this event tonight with some information on what they can do to get more involved in these budget processes, how they can make their voice heard within the city and within the school district. So the people who control these budgets, right, the SRO program budget is split like 50-50 between the school district, DMPS, and the city of Des Moines. The city of Des Moines controls the police department. They control DMPD. They control their budget, most importantly. So we can put some pressure and make our voices heard to the school board because they are the ones that vote and approve the budget. And we can put pressure on and make our voices heard to our city councilor members because they are the ones that approve the city budget. So those two, like very local, very like, you know, there are neighbors, they like live in town. Those are the people that control these budgets. And so we're also going to be sending out some information on how you can get in touch with them, some ideas for maybe like an email template or a script on like what to say when you contact these people. If y'all need any support in contacting them, like feel free to reach out to the Women's Center, reach out to me. We want to advocate for a memorandum of understanding. And what a memorandum of understanding is, it's basically a contract, an agreement between the school district and between the police department. So on those rare occasions when it is necessary for law enforcement to enter a school building, there should be this agreement with the police to limit like when law enforcement can be called into our schools, with particular safeguards in place to ensure that students' right to education and dignity are protected, in addition to their constitutional rights and right to counsel and due process being protected. Right now, as far as I'm aware, this does not exist for DMPS. We need this safeguard in place. It can also, you know, talk about things like police officers are not allowed to touch students. Police officers are not allowed to bring weapons into school, right? Like these are all really important things. And our school board can do this. They can just write this contract up. So that's another thing that we can do, that we can advocate for. Parents, students, and staff fill out that DMPS SRO survey. I believe it needs to be filled out by December 11th. That's something, you know, that you can do to help further this cause. You can encourage other folks to do it. Make sure you're giving students time to fill that out in class. Make sure that that's accessible to everyone. And then we can continue to uplift student voices and support student activism. Like as y'all have seen tonight, so many amazing students within DMPS are doing just like the most work, to further this cause. And so I know there are a lot of community partners, like other nonprofits on the call tonight. It's really our responsibility to like uplift their voices and to support them and their demands however we can within our agency, within our relationship with the school. And then also to keep learning specifically about alternatives to carceral punishment and how we can work to end the school to prison pipeline in our city and eventually our district, our state. And so we'll be sending out resources about all these things in a follow-up email. We'll keep following up with y'all, you know, with more opportunities to get involved in this work, to get involved in the work that the like anti-racist groups of students are working on. This is just the first step, y'all. Like we are by no means done with this. And I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Everybody for sharing. Yes, Andy, the student survey should be uplifted during class time. Absolutely. People need time to fill that out during class. Cool. Clark and Chelsea, y'all have any final words?
I just wanted to add, you know, the best way for us to get this work done is to work together. So it's just, we have to stick together, work together, make sure that we're united so that we can really make change. And I also just want to add, thank you guys so much for sharing your stories, your very vulnerable stories, your very open stories. They are helpful not just to hear, but to know that, okay, this is happening, so this needs to be changed. And additionally, I just want to say I am so impressed by the high schoolers that are currently in high school right now. The changes you guys are making, like, I just know high school is tough on its own, and you guys are really some innovators and catalysts. It's amazing. So great job to you guys.
Yeah. I'll just end with saying, like, keep making noise. That's the best way, I think, to make change. And yeah, keep uplifting our students. And thank you everyone for attending and sharing. And to Clark's point, I wish that so much of this didn't have to be on students. It shouldn't be. So that's why I think more of the community needs to step up. And yeah, hopefully we can get some of this changed.